Blood Money, episode 27, with Nicholas St. Jon. I found election fraud and my government ignored me. All right, we're on the next episode of Blood Money, episode 27 with Nicholas St. Jon. Nicholas, how are you doing today?
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. The connection's a little bit weird. Hopefully it'll improve. But so Nicholas is a freedom fighter. The way I pitch Nicholas is that if you got tyranny on your mind, you're probably going to find Nicholas standing in your way. Nicholas, could you tell us a little bit about your background, what you've been up to, this last number of years in terms of this freedom fight?
Well, it's right at 2 years now. Started actually December 15th of 2020. When Joe Gilbert put out the word to come and speak to our county commissioners about the overreach of the county, the health department, the mandates, all of that stuff. And so about 150 of us showed up to that meeting. And so I had the opportunity to meet a lot of my fellow citizens here in Reno and the Washoe County area. Heard their story about how many businesses have been destroyed, about how much damage the mandates were doing. And so I was also at the same time, I'd written a
Nicholas, do you mind if I ask you, for the reception's really bad. I'm like I'm hearing half of what you're saying. Could you mind if we just try to reconnect? And I know there's some people watching right now. Do you mind if we just try to reconnect and see if we get a better line?
Sure.
Yeah, because if you could sign out and go back in and just make sure you don't have anything else open, just because the reception seems to be really shoddy. I was hearing half the stuff you're saying, man, and it sounds really fascinating. I just want to make sure the audience gets the whole story.
Okay, I'll be right back in.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, guys. We're pausing here for a minute. Nicholas is going to rejoin. I know our producer, the awesome Travis, is watching. I sound fine, Travis, right? You could send me a message here in our private chat. I think my connection's fine, right? Yes, awesome. So we're just going to wait for Nicholas St. Jon to join up. And thank you for your patience, all the folks that are watching right now. So while we wait for Nicholas St. Jon, this weekend we're actually going to be reporting from Nashville. We're going to be doing Freedom Weekend with America Happens at the Reawaken America Tour. We're going to have a lot of great guests, a lot of live conversations, a lot of live interviews. So please make sure to check into America Happens this weekend. And I believe we have Nicholas St. Jon back. So let's try to bring him back on here, and hopefully the connection's good.
Okay.
Hey.
Is this much better?
Oh, it is much better. I could understand your words now. So sorry to start this interview right from the top. So I'm just going to get right into it. So we have freedom fighter Nicholas St. Jon here. And what I was saying earlier on is that if you got tyranny on your mind, Nicholas is probably going to stand in your way. So Nicholas, tell us a little bit about what you've been working on this last few years and, what you've been up to in terms of the freedom fight.
Okay. Well, my story starts really in December of 2020 when Attorney Joey Gilbert called a bunch of us to come to the Board of County Commissioner meeting here in Washoe County, which is the Reno Sparks area here in northern Nevada. And so I showed up with 150 others. And because, you have a lot of time waiting to go into the chambers and speak, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of fellow compatriots and hear their story firsthand about how much damage these mandates were doing to their business. A lot of them had lost their business or had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars of business because of these unconstitutional mandates. And so while that's when my activation started, I say my activation, I started literally back in 2008 when the swine flu started, and something didn't sound right. And so I started doing an investigation on that, and tracing some things on it, and found out that I came to the conclusion that there had been something engineered with the swine flu, tracing the genomes, where it had to pick up each one of the particular pieces, and then where it showed up in a pig down in a small village in South Mexico. None of that made sense. And so eventually I've written 4 books. My last one on that was The Immunity Crisis in America. I have a blog, unsickyourself.com, that I have kind of neglected since all this started. But my first post on there was right on schedule, because about every 2 years, one of these things that come up, and they've been playing this for a couple decades now. And finally, the COVID virus was mysterious enough, and the media hard enough that it scared everybody, and finally they got their pandemic. But they've been trying to do this since probably the mid 90s, but it came into full scale pandemic, or plandemic as some people call it, in January, February of 2020. And so I wrote my first blog there and said, guys, everybody settle down. If you're taking 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams of vitamin C, making sure you're taking D3 and keeping your D levels up, zinc, and just, a few things like that, and you'll weather this. It's just a virus. But the 24/7 fear mongering threw everyone into a complete tailspin, and living in a place, and I was still going out even though we had the lockdowns. And I came back in one day, and my roommates called me into the front room and said, "You can't keep going out like this. You're gonna bring that in. We're both very susceptible. You could kill us." And so I started realizing how serious the fear mongering and how deep that was and how crazy it was in March. And so ended up moving out and into a place of my own, so that every time I came in, somebody wasn't walking around behind me with bleach on a rag wiping down everything I was touching. But anyway, so that's December was when it started. I wouldn't wear a mask. I go into stores. I got cornered in stores. I had the sheriff called on me a number of times. That first meeting in December at the county commission meeting, they called the sheriff on me. And so I got to talk to a sheriff deputy and Reno PD about it. And they agreed there was no law, but they were willing to trespass me nonetheless. And so that was really the beginning of when I realized how serious and how crazy this had gotten.
It's insane. I mean, a virus that doesn't even really kill that many people, 99.8% survival rate, and the Constitution seems to have been tossed out the door
completely. And so I started going to the county commission meetings. I had been doing the research. We found a doctor up in New York, and only the New York Post wrote any article on it. It should have been front page news in every place in the world. This guy was getting IVs of vitamin C, but it was small doses, 1,500 milligrams. Most people that live in the vitamin C IV world, it's 20, 25, 30, 50,000 milligrams of vitamin C, not 1,500. And yet this guy was having phenomenal success of people who were in ICU, very close to death, giving them 3 doses of IV vitamin C, 1,500 milligrams a day. That's 4,500. And they were turning around and living. That should have made the front page of every newspaper in the world. So I put together 4 other methods, brought them to the county commissioners, and put that on their record that there were 5 known treatments for COVID, and that was in February of 2021. Of course, the vaccine hadn't gotten out, and don't get me started on the vaccine. That's a whole nother story. And what we're seeing now is tragic, of all these young people dying of cardiac arrest. It's just criminal.
It's insanity. Just and we had all these very simple methods like vitamin C that was censored through the mainstream media, through the government. That must really light a fire under your ass, man. To see how they're literally willing to sacrifice the children for their own financial gain.
It really does, Vem. That's what's activated me. That's probably one of the big things that keeps me going. We have had, I think it was about 1,100 deaths here in a county of 400,000. Now, 1,100 deaths, every one of them is tragic. So don't get me wrong. Every death is tragic. I was literally on death's doorstep when I got COVID in September of 21. But mine was complicated because I ended up walking into it with a major bacterial infection on top of it. So I was beating the bacterial infection until I got COVID, the Mu variant, and that was even more deadly than the Delta variant. And so 21 days of living hell, not being able to eat, not being able to sleep, being in such pain. Every time if I sat down or laid down, I couldn't sleep for more than 15 minutes. Water was rancid, and so I couldn't hardly even drink. Ended up with a lot of monoclonal infusions. I was doing the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and all the vitamins. I did 4 pass ozone therapies, where the oxygen ozonated my blood. So we were doing everything we could. And other than just the fact that I believe that God says I'm not going to let you die, I probably should have died from that, because it was
Really?
very, very bad. But God brought me through it, and here I am on the front lines, tip of the spear. And so I've been coming up with ideas. That's really been my background. If you know my background, I've been doing efficiency stuff since my days in the Navy on submarines. And so that's, finding that vitamins could turn around a viral infection is just along the lines of what I do. I worked in election integrity as well, and found stuff there and ways to mark ballots that would catch them with their hand in the cookie jar. So very involved in this. I want to see our country return to being great again.
Before we get into the election topic, could you tell me a little bit more about what I found really fascinating about you when I first heard about you is your tendency to find natural and alternative medication that actually works and could save people from things like chemotherapy and other hardcore pharmaceutical drugs. Could you tell us a little bit about that? You were telling me about a cancer drug, for example.
Right. So after I survived, one of the things that I had trouble getting was ivermectin. And so, I'd heard that some people were able to get it from India. So I investigated that and put the word out. So So January 3rd of 2021, I brought some people together, 30 of us, and formed what's now called the Washoe Patriots. And so that organization has grown. We've got several hundred on Telegram and Facebook, and I don't think we're on Signal, but Nextdoor, and of course our organization, WashowPatriots.com, 600 people on an email list, 300 people on our text messaging service. So it's very active, it's widespread. And so I put the word out that was anybody interested in getting ivermectin if I put in an order? And there were several thousand tablets. We ordered several thousand tablets from people saying, hey, I'm interested in it. And so that was kind of the birth of what's now called Alt1, is a private health association, private membership. And so it has taken us out from underneath the regulations because we're private. And so everyone that wants something from us, they can become a member. The membership's free at this point. And we have, I think last year when I totaled it up, we had gone through 27,000 6 milligram tablets of ivermectin. So we have started quite a pipeline of getting supplies, so nobody needs to wait. We've made it dirt cheap because I get it in such high volumes. So I can pass those savings on to people. And we just found a repurposed drug again, like ivermectin was repurposed from parasites and now is the main drug is being used to fight COVID. On the same way, there's a dog dewormer called fenbendazole. And while it has a sister drug called mebendazole, which is for humans, fenbendazole is for dogs. However, the fenbendazole, when you combine it with curcumin, high dose vitamin C, and D3, it ends up being so high in the ability to shrink tumors and get rid of cancer. It's unbelievable. There's been some
Wow.
mice studies with almost 100% success rate, no matter what cancer they inject into these mice using fenbendazole and that protocol.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. And for the viewers, I mean, look at things this way. This COVID vaccine with not much research, no trials, they tried to push upon us. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure, these naysayers would be listening to Nicholas talk right now and say, well, there's, it's made for dogs, it's this, it's that. Do anything to get you off the trail of potential good stuff. So I have a feeling you've spent probably more time researching this than those guys did with the COVID vaccine.
I probably did. I've talked to a number of people because of, I don't have a degree. My IQ is fairly high. And so being able to figure this stuff out helps. And I've gotten into a number of conversations, almost what feels like knockdown, drag out fights with MDs and PhDs over treatments of viruses because I got into one guy was a PhD in virology, and he
Wow.
just could not stand it that perhaps high dose vitamin C could stop Ebola. And what he
Wow.
had described, Ebola is a it's I can't remember the name right now or the term that you bleed. Basically it's like you bleed to death. So it's scurvy, but instead of it taking months to deplete your vitamin C, because that's what scurvy is, because it was introduced or not introduced, but studied when sailors would be at sea for months and months and months, and all of a sudden these guys are dying and they're bleeding to death, and with no idea why are these guys doing this. And then a guy finally figured out it's because they didn't have any fruit and hardly any vegetables on these ships. And so when they introduced limes, we hear British sailors called limeys. That's because they put limes on these ships, and that's what stops scurvy. And so Ebola just depletes the vitamin C levels in your body so fast that essentially instead of taking 3 months to hit scurvy, you do that in 3 or 4 days. And so this PhD guy that I was going back and forth with just could not stand it that perhaps vitamin C could stop scurvy, all right, and stop the Ebola virus. So yeah, watching people die every time I hear someone saying they got sick, it really bothers me because we know that there's so much stuff out there now, and now with the fenbendazole and a whole protocol that we have here at Alt One to start saving people's lives. And then the interesting thing is, the story comes from Joe Tippins. If someone wants to investigate how the fenbendazole story, it starts with a guy named Joe Tippins, and we have that on our website, washoepatriots.com/alt1, and which is across the screen here. You can read about him. At the bottom of the Alt One menu is fenbendazole, and you can read that entire story about Joe, his interviews on Tipton Wellness, and how it turned him around. He was 90% metastasized with small lung cell cancer. 90%. They gave him a 1% chance of survival, and he's still with us today. That was in 2017. And while they put him on a trial drug, he put himself on fenbendazole. And of all the people on the trial drug, everyone died except him. And finally, he came clean with his oncologist and said, why are you alive? You're an outlier. Everybody else is dead. You have survived. And that's when he told him about fenbendazole. And so Joe's been a big proponent of that. There are now thousands and thousands and thousands of people who have listened to him, said, you know what, I'm going to take my health back. I need to be in charge of my body and what we do to treat these diseases. And chemotherapy doesn't have a great track record. It was, the death rates of people on chemotherapy is still very, very, very high. Now, it has had some effect, and there are people that are, I won't say are cured, they call them in remission, but they
Mhm.
fight that the rest of their lives. And fenbendazole, he's on fenbendazole, and he is completely clear. They did a PET scan 5 months after he went on fenbendazole, and the PET scan showed zero cancer. And he's been
Wow.
that way now since 2018.
Wow. 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 Speaking with you, I mean, honestly, I get this kind of sense of why our mainstream media is so screwed up, because these conversations we're having are things that should be in the mainstream. All we hear in the mainstream is like the same broken record, where it's like the same 3-4 things over and over again. Whereas these kind of conversations, because you never know, like, the fembezimol, sorry if I'm saying the name wrong, might not work on everybody, but the people it works for, they should be able to have access to this information and have it be an option.
Well, and it's Joe proved that you can take fenbendazole at the same time you're taking chemotherapy.
Wow.
So that's been a big question. Of course, the oncologist, their job, guys, is to scare you. And they do a really great job of it. They've been trained to do that for years and years and years. And so they have become really pros at scaring you so you do just what they say. And so it puts into your
By the
mind.
way, sorry to interrupt you. That's a trick of every industrial complex, right? The medical industrial complex scares you and forces you into stuff. The attorney industrial complex, the person that's going to scare you the most is any lawyer that you hire, because their job is to scare you. Their job is to create conflict. The military industry with them. So sorry to interrupt you, but just wanted to make that point that all these industrial complexes that have been corrupted are doing the same trick on the people.
Well, and one of the things, so I'm a believer and follower of Jesus Christ. I believe in the church. And when I saw the government shutting the churches down, I can't tell you how badly that bothered me. Here's the government that is literally overruling God. And now I don't blame some churches for closing their doors for a week or two until we figure this out. But there are churches today, 2 years later, after those mandates came in, that they never reopened. And, Joey Gilbert took to court a couple of different churches, and they got some of that reversed. But it was funny. Every single pastor, before they closed down, did a sermon on do not be afraid. Jesus being in the back of the boat asleep during the storm, and they wake him up because they're about to go under, and he says, "Fear not, don't be afraid." And then he speaks to the storm, and it stops. Others spoke on Psalm 91 about do not be afraid, and then they all became afraid. And fear's not from God. It says if perfect love casts out fear, and so we need to rise above that. Do not let this. Find yourself living in fear. You need to start asking yourself some questions about where you live in relation to God and to our fellow mankind, as to whether you're gonna be one of those who steps up and leads, or are you gonna walk in fear, and that's what they want you to do.
Yeah. Especially as a Christian, to have fear of things like death, it's just kind of I don't know, contradictory messages there. Tell us about when we first connected. The topic that we talked about at length was this election fraud issue, and I know you've been very passionate about for a very long time. And seems like you've come up with some really clever methods. Could you tell us a little bit about your election fraud journey?
Okay. Yeah, it's so for me, it started. There was I'm trying to think. Dan Schultz broadcast a thing on precinct strategies, and so I thought, you know what, that I wasn't aware that there was a central committee and that there was precincts and all that stuff. I knew about precincts because you voted in your precinct in those days a long time ago, but not aware of how much power the central committee had, and how much we, the people, once we got into the central committee, could have an influence in all kinds of things for the Republican and Democratic parties. And so I met with so I put together a program. I'm a programmer and design systems online. And so I put together a quick little thing to be able to sign up people to get them into the central committee. So I went and met with the Washoe GOP people. And one of the guys who was in that meeting was a database guy. And he said, Nicholas, would that help? Would it help if you had the voter rolls? Well, boy, I guess it would. I didn't know I could have them. So he sent me the voter rolls, and then I started looking at them, and then the numbers just didn't make sense. For the number of people that were in the county at the time, the number of people who were registered on it looked to be way too high. There's a lot more people on here than should be, it looks like. I think when I did the calculation, it was something like 0.45 or 54 children on average per household. Well, that's nowhere close to the average, knowing what the numbers of children are here in the school districts and all that stuff. So I pointed out, and his statement to me was, "Oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. This is where it all starts, guys. What do you mean? Don't be worried." And so that was kind of the first trigger that things needed to be looked into. And so, long story short, fast forward to the spring of 21, and I started looking at the results of the 2020 election. And again, things didn't look right. And so eventually we pulled all of the cast vote records. Ended up getting selected by Mike Lindell's group and represented Nevada at the Moment of Truth Summit back in August of 21, and talked about a report that I opened up called the Provisional Voting Records Errors and Analysis, or Errors and Anomalies for General Election 2020. When I got so I started working with Jeff O'Donnell, who is well known for his database analysis. He said, "No, something looks strange with the provisionals. Have you looked at this?" And so I went in and looked at it for Washoe County, and we had 0 provisionals. Well, we're the second largest county in the state. How did we have 0 in a year that had skyrocketed for every other county? And Clark County had 60,000, and the next one was we were at 0. And so I looked into that, come to find out. There was some kind of software glitch that put 2,950 people on election day registering at a town of 3,200 people. 2,950 people came into Cold Springs and registered to same day voting as provisional voting ballots. And I said, that's just, I mean, it's an impossibility.
Impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we went out and when we went and got, we got a list of some people, went out to Washoe City and Incline Village and got affidavits of people saying we didn't do that. So that opened up the report. I took it to the county commissioners, nothing. So I took it to the manager and forced a meeting with him, and that led them to an investigation. He opened an investigation into it. He says, well, you bring up some good points. Nobody has some answers. Let's go see if we can find some answers. And so that was when the provisional voting report and investigation got started on July 14th. And since then, they had a preliminary report that was pretty condescending. Nicholas just doesn't understand this stuff, or you don't understand how this works, or the voter rolls are changing all the time. Look, I understand all of that. And when we started challenging that preliminary report, which they fought against us on everything. First, I asked for the report a few days before we went to that meeting. Wouldn't give it to me. So we got to see that report as we sat down in that meeting with them. They went through it. It just raised more questions. She came to the conclusion that the data that I had was bad data. Well, you would think that if the investigator comes up that the data you were given was bad, the next question should be who gave it to him and why did you give him bad data?
Who gave that data? Who gave that data?
Well, and that's a good question. All I have is a public records request, and I was asking for the data that came back from the Secretary of State, and yet I did not get that data. I got something else.
Wait, so you asked for government data. They send you that data. You base your investigation on their data, and now they're saying it's bad data.
Right.
So exactly. Why isn't the goal to fix this very, very severe issue?
Well, you would think the next question is who gave him the data, and why did you give him bad data instead of the right data? And so we can't get that question answered. We did find out why everyone came up as Cold Springs on election day, which still doesn't make sense because when you went and did provisional voting in early election, it showed up the polling place that you went to. But on election day, they somehow, it was different software? Why would on election day, everyone who did provisional show up on Cold Springs while early voting showed up at each of the polling places just like they were supposed to be? Haven't answered that question. So we've now been through 2 review boards. The first one I went to, she had it marked as completed. I had my 3 minutes, which don't get me started on the 3-minute thing. It's crazy. It's a way of limiting us. It's all about control. It's not about listening to we the people anymore. As you well know, Vem, I know where you're at down there in Vegas. They fight the same thing.
They laugh at us. They laugh at us when we go in there and we try to make these complaints. It's absolutely ridiculous. They have no sense of serving the people whatsoever.
Nope. So anyway, 2 review boards still haven't answered the question. I just took it again before the county commissioners this morning saying, it's your review board. You guys need to get on this. You need to find out why they're not answering the questions. And so I just keep pushing it.
Yeah. Are these like software glitches? You had mentioned software glitches. It could have been software glitches. I mean, are these software glitches or are these intentional codes that are doing this sort of thing?
Yes and yes. So the provisional was a software glitch. Why they had 2 different softwares running, one in early election, one on election day, and the one on election day couldn't figure out where you were. It should be troubling, right? Because how do you, if you can't tell where you're voting from, how do we know if you're voted from the right place or not? Whether you got the right ballot, all of that stuff. And so, if you voted in Cold Springs, your ballot could look different depending on did the software pick up that you were actually in District 3 instead of District 5, types of things. So that was a glitch. But on another one, we got the cast vote records, and I was told that Marsha Burglar, who was the incumbent for District 1 seat on the county commission, she was incumbent running against Alexis Hill, and it was the big mail-in ballot stuff because it was 2020. And so we got the cast vote records. Now, cast vote records only give you a sequential number as they're fed through the machines. And they don't have a date and timestamp, which would be very, very, very valuable if we could get date and timestamps on these cast vote records, but we didn't. So we ran the analysis on this cast vote records. And I don't know if you have a photo or an image of the lines as we put them in, but it showed something very, very, very strange. First of all, Alexis ran off to a huge lead, a 50-point lead by the time we were up to 25% of the votes that were cast counted. 50%, 50-point lead over an incumbent. In the first 5,000 votes cast, we found 77 instances where there were blocks of sequential votes where all of them were for one candidate, not the other. And so Alexis Hill had 77 instances in the first 5,000 votes cast of 10 to 27 sequential votes uninterrupted.
Wow.
Marsha had just a couple of instances of maximum 8. A couple versus 77, maximum 8, maximum of 27. So the machines were actually flipping votes from Marsha into Alexis. And so it ran off. It ended up being a line. It was a very linear line as they were flipping these votes into Alexis Hill's camp. And so it was a very sharp line going up for the first 25% of the votes counted. And then like an AI or an adjustment happened. And instead of it being so steep, it lowered so that it wasn't quite as steep. So by the time you get to about 50%, the gap was close to 25%, or I'm sorry, 35% of Alexis leading Marsha. Then it gets released. And now the votes go up and down like they're supposed to. They come and go. You see a little wiggling in the room in the lines as the votes get counted, and that's normal. What we saw in the first percent of two lines that were linear, not normal. Dreza tried to run an analysis on how many elections would we have to ever see that pattern naturally, and her calculation stopped when it hit 50 zeros.
Whoa.
One with 50 zeros behind it, which essentially says it's impossible.
Yeah. Wow. Right?
So
I mean, the machines are basically where the fraud is at. They're through whatever algorithm, which we keep hearing.
Exactly. Yeah. So the algorithm was set, and working with Jeff O'Donnell, we saw one of two things happen. They either front loaded the votes, or at the 25% mark, they started evening out the votes. So there's something magical in these machines about the 25% mark. And that's what we saw at 25%. It lowered the algorithm because otherwise she would have won, by a bazillion votes. And this is basically a no name coming up against an incumbent. And so it proved, and by the time you get through the whole thing, Marcia had closed the gap within 10 points. They had not jacked her up so much, 50%, 25%, or 35%. Marcia should have won that race. So I created that report called the reasonable doubt, because we took it to the sheriff. And now the sheriff has the final authority. If something does not look right in an election, he can step in. He or she can step in and get rid of that part of the election that isn't what they feel is not safe or is not going to work properly. They have the ultimate authority over those elections, and they could pull the machines if they wanted to. We did the report to, so the sheriff was apparently too busy to talk to someone about election fraud, but I did meet with an undersheriff and an associate. And I got them on, recorded that they said, yeah, something could be happening here. Well, that's all it takes. It's reasonable doubt. If you can't say 100% you can trust these machines, you're supposed to pull the machines. And they said that, we don't believe we can do that. We don't believe we have the power to do that. And they took it to the sheriff. I said, invite me in so I can explain this, because you guys don't understand this stuff. They didn't invite me in. They took it to the sheriff supposedly, and ended up coming back saying, we can't do anything, but if you want to make a case out of it, you can file that. And so we have a case number 22-5105. Now that was supposed to go to the Attorney General. Did it?
Yeah. Aaron Ford, who doesn't believe in anything pertaining to this sort.
And they sent it to the Secretary of State, who has no judicial power. They can't prosecute anybody. They can't do anything. And they would have to be recused, because guess what? They oversee the ROV that we're filing this case against. So it just gets more and more absurd.
Yeah. So where is it now? Like you have a case that's pending, and in terms of the authorities, they're just like kind of ignoring it at this point?
You know what? It looks like it. I have never been contacted by the Secretary of State, who has that case. It has all of my contact information in. So now I'm going to have to do, again, their job. I'm going to have to go find out where this case is and force them to do an investigation into this case. So how I get it out of the Secretary of State and back to the Attorney General. Of course, Chautauqua did not get Attorney General, so we have an Attorney General who does not have what I believe is our best interest and the Constitution as their foundation. So whether I get it to go anywhere in the Attorney General once I try to get it back over to them or not, we'll see. I don't have a lot of hope for that.
Yeah. I mistakenly said the Secretary of State, Aaron Ford. I meant Attorney General Aaron Ford, and he's already said that he doesn't believe there's any election fraud. In fact, we did an episode of a show that we do called Follow the Money to investigate where he's getting all his financing from. And it's pretty much getting all his financing from people that are against any of this voter fraud talk. So I don't see him doing much.
Well, the whole deal is, Vem, that it's fine with me because everyone keeps telling Nicholas, what do you want? What do you think you're going to get from this? What I'm getting from this is every time they don't do something, we have a case file now that'll go to the Attorney General. When I get my case in front of a grand jury and he has not done his job to investigate this, his name gets added to the grand jury for investigation.
Yeah. Grand juries are, that's the magic we got to all strive for, is grand juries, because that's the only way to overcome the fraud.
Right. And, and I filed 2 criminal complaints, took them to the courthouse, and the clerks wouldn't file them. Then the supervisors wouldn't take them. They went to took them to 2 judges, and the judges, believe this, Vem, this is unbelievable. The judges came back and said, because you're a civilian, because you're not an employee of a government agency, you do not have the right to file a criminal complaint.
Wow.
The next day I came back with the NRS code. I read the NRS code to them and said, do you see anything in here of who it says who can and cannot file a criminal complaint? And they said, it doesn't look like there's anything there. I said, well, good, then file saying we're not going to file this.
They said we're not going to file it after you showed them the NRS statute.
Yes. So again, they're going to be in my complaint that goes to the grand jury for investigation, and now it includes 2 judges.
Wow.
So they just keep broadening the net, and like I said, I'm fine with that. I'll just keep adding it to it. I document everything really well, and so when I get my case to the grand jury, it's going to make a big splash. Fortunately, unfortunately, I tried. Well, after that, they said, "Well, go take it up to the DA. They're the ones who file criminal complaints." And so I took it up to the DA's office. They reluctantly took it, and ended up 2 days later, I get a call from somebody, and I still don't know who that is, saying, "Yeah, it came to the civil side of the DA, and we've looked at it and decided that we're not going to pursue this."
Yeah, of course they're not. Of course they're not.
And so I've asked, by what authority do you have not to pursue this criminal complaint? I want to know what either the statutes are or your policy and procedures and who it was that did that. And I've gotten no answer. I've been back there half a dozen times. I keep talking to more and more investigators, and it's finally gotten to the assistant DA, who isn't returning my calls or my emails.
Wow. I mean, Nicholas, I got to give you a lot of credit for putting up the fight, because these are highly corrupted institutions. We don't talk about the judiciary enough. I mean, the judiciary is absolutely a farce. I mean, a complete farce on so many levels. We don't talk about that too much, but these election fraud cases are a perfect example. And then, you go into things like the criminal justice system and family courts, and it's a complete shit show, corruption everywhere, unfortunately. I mean, what do you do now? What's your next steps when you're hitting these brick walls? Is it pretty much relying on the grand jury and hoping that all comes together?
There's a couple things. For the county commissioners, I already filed. Now we have 2 new county commissioners, so I have to get my notice of intent to file a claim against their bonds, because they're all bonded, right? Judges are bonded. All these guys that are officials are bonded. And so I did the investigation into that. And so the bonds for the county commissioners all go through a company, RLI, out of, I think it's Illinois. And so I've already investigated that. I've already filed a notice of intent. You have to tell them you intend to file a claim against their bond. And so I have 2 of them have already been served. I have to file that on the new ones. I was trying to wait until I had a full thing on it, showing literally hundreds of violations. But it's been a lot of work. My binder is now 3 inches thick of minutes. Our time's going into the county commission meetings and demanding they put the on the agenda that they've ignored us on. And so this year the tactic is, the more people I can get to go into the county commission meetings and demand that they take some action than they don't. Every one of those is a violation of their oath.
Wow.
every one of them.
Wow.
And so First Amendment says that we have a right for a redress of grievances. And for your audience, you can rattle through the First Amendment and read that as a redress of grievances. Most people don't even know what redress is, and it's not putting on another set of clothes. It's a redress, and that term means that the officials are obligated by our First Amendment to meet with us, have an open discussion, and resolve these issues as best we can. Now, that doesn't mean that every citizen who brings in a complaint, it says, look, I want a bridge built over this canyon because it'll make my travel easier. They're going to get everything they do. But the fact that they're not meeting with us at all is a complete violation, multiple violations of our rights and their oath over and over and over. And here's what I love, Vem. Our founding fathers were brilliant, and I believe they were inspired by God to write the stuff the way it is so that it gave us a back door into fighting the corruption that we're seeing. So if you take and start filing grievances against their bonds, and their insurance company is obligated to investigate this stuff. And so we're in the right. When they start looking at this and realize we've been coming in here for 25 months, not had one resolution ever put on the agenda, never had a sit down discussion with it. They can't prove any meetings of trying to redress any of this stuff. And so there's been hundreds of violations. We start filing this stuff and those bonds get paid out. It's $100,000 bond. They pay out $100,000 and extinguish that bond for that particular official. They get removed from office for being untrusted, because by law you have to have a bail, or you have to have this bond in place. And once that bond is extinguished, you're untrusted. And if you don't get another bond in place, you're removed from office. Not only are you removed, but you're now basically blacklisted. You can never hold an office in the county and possibly the state ever again.
Yep.
So it's serious.
It's
one of our avenues we're pursuing. The other one, of course, is.
You cut out. You cut out, Nicholas. So you said the other one, and then it cut out.
The other one is continuing the grand jury. I just called and to see, because the grand jury has to be impaneled. There was one impaneled here in Washoe County in May. They went 2 years with the grand jury. That's actually against the law. There's supposed to be a grand jury impaneled every year, because that's the mechanism that the DA has to come to them. The grand jury looks at it and then comes back with an indictment or whatever the other thing is that it's called. And I can't remember the term, but there's a special term that says, no, there's nothing here, and we're not going to indicate you need to take this to trial.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this whole bonds thing is just so fascinating to me, because, one of the things that it signifies is they really pushed us to a point where really destroying their careers is our only option. And that's sad. That's very sad, because all they have to do is respect the law, respect the Constitution, and we'd be fine right now. We wouldn't be literally looking to destroy the careers of judges. And I speak to some of you judges out there. I know some of you guys watch this show. And really, it's a shame. It's a shame that it's come to this, but we have to do what we have to do, because a lot of judges are not respecting the law out there. A lot of judges do not represent we the people. Bribery and corruption is at a level that I think signifies the fall of countries and empires, if you look at it historically, with this much corruption in our judicial ranks. But kudos to you, because this bond thing, I'm sure, really is going to terrify some of these folks, losing their insurance.
Well, in other places, there's been some places around the country that people heard about the bonds, filed a notice to file a claim against a bond for some, especially school districts and trustees and school board members, and that did scare them, and they fell in line and they stopped the mandates of social distancing and mask requirements and the shot, and they got results. I have not had that result yet with the county commissioners, but it's an avenue, and I intend to go down that road. You were talking about judges. Judges have, I believe they have bonds as well, and you can find out. But they also have another way that holds them accountable, and that is to file a grievance against an attorney or a judge. And they really don't like that all that often. And when they get a whole bunch of them, then they can actually have their bar license removed, because they just become basically, they're deemed out of control, and we can't risk them being on the bench or representing people as an attorney. So filing a grievance against a judge or an attorney also has a lot of power. And so while I haven't gotten to the place where we've had to do that, I know there are people up here that have tried to take things into court and have had judges who basically were biased against them and were letting things slide that were not right in their courtrooms, not having the documentation, having one or both attorneys overstepping their boundaries of what an attorney can and can't do, and not holding any of them accountable. So this idea of filing a grievance, a bar grievance, is another one of those aspects that I recommend, that if you've been in court and you've had bad results, either with your attorney or with a judge that you felt was just not really being even fair, look into filing a bar grievance.
Yeah. I mean, these are the ways we fight for our power. And, the fact that you've done all this research and know all these different avenues, I mean, this is what makes us powerful, is this knowledge of knowing how to really fight this tyranny.
Well, yeah, I mean, Scripture says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge," and I believe that knowledge, while knowledge can take you a long way, you've probably heard a lot of the stories of, it's a David versus Goliath, right? We the people are David, and we've got this monolith, this huge organization called the government, which is Goliath. And here's what I love about that story. One, David knew who his God was and believed that he would go into a battle with him. And George Washington, he sought divine inspiration and guidance, and ended up this ragtag group of colonists. By the way, only 3% of the colonists ever stepped up to fight in that war. 3%, not very many. So it's a small group, but with divine inspiration and strategically timed attacks, George Washington beat the greatest army the world had ever seen. And so we're David and Goliath, but David had to stop and pick up those stones, and he put them in his bag. And then he goes up against, here's a kid. I mean, this guy is probably 14, 15 years old, against this guy who they statistically or historically claim is a 9-foot giant. I've been around some basketball players who are 7 foot. That's pretty intimidating. A guy that's 9 foot would be tough. And all of Israel shirked back from every time this guy stepped up and said, "Hey, come on, who's going to take me on?" And none of them would take him on. Here's this kid. And he puts a stone in his sling and he swings it over his head, and then he lets go of it. And then after he lets go of it, he said, "God, this stone's now in your hand. You need to guide it to the place that it needs to go." And it hits Goliath where? Right in the forehead. Pow, down he goes. And before that conversation, David said, I'm gonna take you down, and then I'm gonna cut your head off. Now, David didn't have a sword. After Goliath falls, he goes over and takes Goliath's own sword and cuts his head off. So, but none of that happened until David put that stone in his sling and slung it over his head, let it go. And I believe that's what God calls us to do. Get prepared, go into battle, put the rock in your sling, and then let it go, and then leave the results up to God. He will take this down in his time.
Yep. David's fast, David's agile. That's the thing that that's the thing that in the Malcolm Gladwell book, I think, he talks about that. And David actually wasn't the underdog, because he could run around, and something to be said about that. Something to be said about going up against these humongous forces with the agility that we have, with the information that we have, with our ability to move around. They're almost prisoners of their own corruption, and I think that's what ultimately is going to help to make us the victors of this freedom fight.
Absolutely. And the more, while we don't need hundreds of thousands, 10, 15, 20, we went into that review meeting and I put the word out I was going in. I said, I'd like to have some support. 26 people showed up to that review meeting. They probably had not had 26 people combined at all review meetings from the citizens in the last 5 years.
Wow.
I hope that put the fear of God into some of them. Because this one was 25, the next one could have 50 or 100.
Yeah, people are waking up. Nicholas, could you tell the viewer a little bit about your websites where they could find out, all this amazing information, whether the health products, the work that you're doing?
Yes, our main website is Washoe Patriots, and Washoe is the name of the Indian tribe here that Washoe County was named after, and it's spelled like Washoe, Washoe, Washoe Patriots, plural.com. On there, we have the Alt 1. Our homepage has a lot of the information I have on the provisional voting report. You can download that there. I also have the reasonable doubt report. And then on there, you'll see several of the instances, the videos that we had when I was standing up against the overreach of the metal detector to illegally search us. We demanded, by what authority do you have to override the Fourth Amendment? And they don't have one. And so I've challenged that. You can watch those videos. Hopefully it'll inspire you to start standing up against some of the tyranny in your area too. It's scary. I'll tell you. At one point I called 911 on the county because they would not let me into a meeting. And Of course the sheriff showed up, 5 of them. For little old me, I called them, didn't even talk, I was the victim, and they didn't even talk to the perpetrator.
Wow.
And so it can be scary. You never know when something's going to go south on you. Our founding fathers, they paid the ultimate price with their lives and their blood. And hopefully it won't come to that here. But, we need to stand up. So you can see that. So it's WashingtonPatriots.com. On there, up at the top is one of the menu items is Alt 1. That's our private health association. You can learn more about that. You can become members. Members free. And at that point, we can actually have a dialogue about what you're going through, what I know. And I'm not an MD, I'm not a doctor. I don't profess to be a doctor, but I have significant knowledge in studying of that stuff. So we can enter into a discussion. I can tell you what I've seen and what I've studied and what I think could help you the most. And then we have a lot of those therapeutics are available, and you can purchase them right from us at Alt 1. And then we have a Washoe channel, a Rumble channel, Washoe Patriots. So it's rumble.com/Washoe Patriots. And you can see a number of the videos there as well. Everything from the county commission meetings where I've been escorted out of the chambers to standing up against the tyranny, to the detectors and, run-ins with people at places where I didn't have a mask and they would call the police or the sheriff on me. All those are on our Rumble channel at Washoe Patriots is our group name. We're also on I don't think of a lot of the other ones. I think we're on Gab. We don't do a lot with Gab, but we do have presence on a number of the others. Truth Social, we're on there as well, but again, not doing a lot yet with those.
Wow. You're an amazing warrior, sir. It sounds, just those videos just sound kind of awful, but at least you've documented the fact that you stood up and didn't take shit from these authoritarians, frankly, good for you. Nicholas, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the Blood Money podcast. We'd love to have you back on because there's so much we could talk with you about, like the natural remedies and, all these different freedom fights you have going on. So we look forward to having you back on the future. And other than that, just wanted to drop some information here regarding tomorrow. We premiere at 2 p.m. on America Happens Pacific Standard Time. We premiere Gianna Michelli's new show called Legal Fuckery, where, frankly, we touch upon some of the topics here about how to overcome corruption in our legal and judicial circles. And then this weekend, we're going to be in Nashville from the Reawaken Festival, where America Happens is going to be featuring Freedom Weekend. A lot of interviews coming up on that weekend, including with Kevin Jenkins and Vandersteel. And join us back on here for Blood Money and the America Happens shows at americahappens.com. See you on the next episode.
Thank you.